And what a revival for the veteran from Maryland.
Blaine and Mickey doing the show today, remembering your friend, Frank Wycheck, who passed away. Reports are on Saturday. Most of us found out on Sunday. And we're just like you, trying to process what we know and what we're finding out. And Blaine told us he had reached out to a great friend of his and ours in this radio station. And Kevin Ingram was kind enough to join us, and he joins us now. Kevin, on a difficult day, man, we appreciate you. We appreciate your time so much, buddy.
Oh, sure thing. Glad to do it. Yeah, glad to come on and talk about Frank, and a lot of fun times we had doing the radio show and everything else. So, yeah, I really appreciate you guys asking me.
You know, it's crazy, Kevin, because for a whole bunch of people, they know Frank Wycheck, the Titan. Frank Wycheck was a great Titan. He was a great football player. You know, he was a great player at Maryland, and then he goes to the NFL, but he was also a great broadcaster. And I'll just tell you, this is me personally talking. You know, the wake-up zone with you and Kevin, or you and Mark and Frank, that was as good as anybody has done radio in this town.
No question.
We're not sitting here. Nobody's doing anything without the work that guys like you did. And for Frank to have been a part of not only a great football team, but a great radio team, that you and the late now Mark Howard and, you know, Frank, you guys did such great work. And I can't imagine in the heyday of that thing what it was like clocking in every day, especially for you to sit between Frank and Mark and think, I have no idea what's going to happen between these guys every day.
That's a pretty good way of describing it, because literally I had no idea what was going to happen a whole lot of days. I was kind of the referee for those guys. I always joke I kept them from getting into a fist fight some days. I mean, it was, you know, we'd have some knockdown, drag out arguments, but it was all sort of in fun and kind of in a pro wrestling sort of way. But man, we had some adventures. We had some goofy bits and things we did. We will probably talk about the walk off and the softball challenges and our trip to the Hall of Fame up in Canton that had a lot of interesting parts to it. But man, I had so much fun with those guys, and then of course with Blaine too, part of our show for 2 or 3 years. It was so much fun all that time I spent with all those guys.
Yeah, on an emotional day. You know, one of the first things Blaine said was he brought up the infamous walk-off, which for people who are new to the city, you know, the 117 people who moved here yesterday and the 117 the day before, can you even just give them the cliff notes for that? Because that may have been one of the most legendary radio things that ever happened in this city.
Yeah, for those 234 people, if my math is right. Well, it started out, you know, Mark had been walking a lot and got into better shape, and he lost some weight, and he's feeling all good, and he starts to kind of chirp a little on the show about, you know, how he can get out and walk Frank into the ground was the phrase that he used, and that became a legendary phrase of its own after the whole thing was done. But so Frank's like, okay, well, let's, you know, we'll have a walk-off. I don't know if Mark challenged him or if Kaharski was involved, but it developed into this whole thing where we're going to have this walk-off at the downtown YMCA. So we go down there, and we set the whole thing up, and it was supposed to happen like maybe 7 o'clock hour, 8 o'clock hour, and we hyped it up, and then so it's time for the walk-off, and Mark gets out there and gets going, and then I don't know if he pulled a hamstring or had some sort of issue, but he had to shut it down pretty quickly. And by that point, Frank's up there, you know, running laps around the track at the Y downtown, and the whole thing just blowing up, and it was the funniest thing ever just to sit back and watch. Paul Bible was there with me, and Kaharski. We were just sitting there watching this whole thing go down, and you know, and it got to a point where, like, you know, Frank's like running laps backwards while Mark's trying to, you know, get around the track, and then it just devolved into us playing all these clips from the thing forever, including a clip of Tiger Woods talking about how his glutes weren't firing. Yeah, that was an all-timer. That seems to be a favorite of a lot of people when they talk about our show, and I got to say that was one of my favorites too.
Oh man, it's still just as funny as it was that day. Kevin Ingram, Zone royalty, on with us now.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You guys started the 104.5, the zone in the market, and took it over, and everybody's chasing you guys, man. So I was just happy to be a part of it. And Frank told me, don't F that up, man. We did a good job there. So my job was just to ease in there and just sit back. I was never going to be Frank, and I was never going to sit there and argue with Mark. So that was a losing battle to me. So take us through one of even if it's something really small, one of those epic battles of argument, because it was just funny to see Frank always poke Mark, and then he would just fall for it every time. It could have been something not of substance, but still was one that you probably remember the most.
Oh, there are all kinds of them, because I mean, we'd argue about football and baseball, and we had this whole thing about the Jeter play in that playoff game against Oakland, and Mark's like, he could have died, and Frank was, jumped all over that. I think we all did on that play. They just had some epic arguments about everything under the sun, and we talk about rock and roll and wrestling and Star Wars movies and all that stuff. I think that's really where I connected well with Frank, was for as much of a all pro football player as he was, he really had a geeky side too, and I liked a lot of the same stuff that he did when it came to like old tired rock bands and talking about Star Wars and all this stuff.
Because birthdays were close too, right?
They were, yeah. We were actually 2 weeks apart. Like his is in the middle of October, mine's early November. But me and Frank and Paul Bible are all born within like a month and a half of each other, so we all related well in that way, and that we had a lot of similar experiences when we grew up. So we all connected well there. But yeah, Mark and Frank just battling it out over everything, and we would devolve into smack talk about donut eating contests. We did that a lot when we were sponsored by Dunkin' Donuts. We had a donut eating belt, and that it got retired. Somebody has the belt somewhere. I don't know whatever happened to it, but those guys would have contests with listeners, and I don't know. We it just felt like we went down every avenue you could in arguing about stuff. We did brackets, for cereal, and I just all those sorts of things, especially in the summertime when there wasn't a lot going on. We kind of drift off into other things. But yeah, it was a lot of funny stuff between those two. And it was fun just to sit back and let them argue about everything.
Oh yeah, no doubt. That's you been the point guard and the best in the business that you were. I guess tell us something about the Canton story.
The Canton story. Okay, so when Bruce Matthews got in the Hall of Fame, and that was in about 2007, and so me and Mark and Frank and Brad Willis, who was our program director back then, they booked us a private plane to fly up to Canton to do our show, like on the Friday, maybe on the Thursday and the Friday, and then we did a special show, leading into Bruce Matthews being inducted into the Hall of Fame. And so there were a lot of adventures to that trip. We did our show, and then we took a tour of the Hall of Fame, and we go in and we watch this movie about the history of football. So they dim the lights, and again, this is after we'd done our show, and all of a sudden you hear somebody snoring, and it's Mark. And he's fallen asleep during the history of football. And so, Frank and I never let him hear the end of that one. And then on the Saturday, we went out to this golf tournament. They were having like the PGA Tour event in Akron. So we went over to Firestone and saw that. And we go out to the driving range, and Frank knows Fred Funk, who he had known from Maryland, who was on the PGA Tour back then. And so, Frank's trying to get his attention. He keeps hollering at him, and it's like, "Hey, Freddie!" And Fred Funk doesn't really realize who it is, and he just kind of gives him, "Oh, hey, buddy," and then he walked right past him. And Frank's getting more been out of shape by the minute here when Fred Funk is just kind of giving him the brush off a couple times, and I'm watching all this just rolling, because it's like, okay, Frank, you're kind of seeing how the other half lives here a little bit, but he finally got his attention, and Fred Funk figured out who it was. And, I don't know. It seemed like there was an issue with the plane or something when we were flying up there. But yeah, that was a trip of legend. There was a lot of stuff that went into that one, but it was a lot of fun. It was really special to be there at the Hall of Fame, especially when with Bruce Matthews getting inducted, and how much that meant to Frank to be there. I mean, that was really, really important for him, and it was cool to be a part of that whole thing.
Yeah, that's outstanding there. We're on with Kevin Ingram, former host of 104.5 The Zone. Morning show.
Kevin, you got to work with Frank, you got to work with Blaine, and I've worked with Blaine and all these years, and also done a lot of work on pre and post with Dyson. To me, it's always interesting when you go places with them, because people don't just connect with them as Titans. like I remember that time, Blaine, that you hit this guy so hard, or Frank, I remember that touchdown you scored. I've always been amazed at how many people have personal stories about all of the guys from their era. It's like they had themselves cloned, and they went to everything that happened in Middle Tennessee or South Central Kentucky for years. Like, people will bring a picture of Blaine and be like, this is you holding me as a baby. And it's like
that means I'm old.
but I imagine you got a lot of that with Frank too, or somebody would come in and go, "Hey, this is my jersey I bought when I was a kid, but you signed it," and it's like, "Oh, was it at a training camp?" Like, "No, you came to my school," or "No, you were at my bar mitzvah." It's just amazing the ground that these guys covered to essentially go out and sell pro football to people in Middle Tennessee when they got here.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, those guys are great ambassadors. You're talking about Blaine or Frank or Steve and Eddie, and the players from that era. You think about Marcus Robertson, Blaine. I know was the running mate there in the safety spots. I mean, those guys that came here from Houston and were part of that first Titans team that made it all the way to the Super Bowl. I think fans connected with that group maybe more than any other team since then. Because they just, whatever it was, they just identified with that team because it was so special, and you had such good teams and good seasons during that stretch, and the Super Bowl run was so cool with the miracle play, and then those wins in Indy and in Jacksonville to get to the Super Bowl. But you guys are just such great ambassadors for football coming to Nashville, pro football coming to this city. And it's just been neat to see people still identify so much with those players from that era. And, man, I mean, you guys see it and go to the games. You still see a 23 Bishop jersey. You see an 89 Wycheck or, a number 9 for McNair or 27 for Eddie. All those, Javon, you see his jersey too. You see all those still at the games even now. Some of them are a little more faded than others. But you guys and those teams just really connected with the fan base in a way that was just really, really special.
How long was it for you till you realized what you guys had was special on the Wake Up Zone? Because, chemistry when you're in a room with people, but then like you go to the grocery store or the bowling alley or church and people, tug you on the arm and tell you, how long was it until you realized you'd hit on something
special?
I think we had pretty good chemistry from the start. I knew Mark a little. I knew Frank a little, just from covering the team a little bit during the years at the end of his career. But I didn't know either one of them really, really well. And I never met Paul, our producer, before we started doing the show together. But I think we figured out early on that we had good chemistry. And then by the time a year or two went by, things started to really get rolling. And I was asked earlier about, did you realize in the moment that the thing was as big as it was? And I don't think I ever really did. Like, to me, it was always, doing a radio show and I'm having fun and working with my friends. And, I go in and do the show and then I go on with the rest of my day. And to have people tell me now that they grew up, riding with their parents in the car, listening to our show, or, the influence that it had on people who got into broadcasting, to me, that's really something to hear. But yeah, I think we figured out that we had hit on something pretty good, within, I don't know if a few months or a couple of years, but, once it kind of took off, you could definitely feel some momentum. But in the moment, like, I probably didn't really realize or appreciate it maybe as much as I should have.
Kevin Ingram hanging out with us, legend from this radio station right here.
Well, before we let you go, Kevin, man, thanks for coming on first and foremost. But I have to ask you this one question. I know Frank and all of us, athletes, and when we played, we thought we were invincible, and we all in our minds felt like, certain plays stood out in our minds. Outside of Music City Miracle, did Frank ever hit around with what was one of his favorite plays outside of that Music City Miracle play?
Yeah,
he always talked about how he was a great passer. He used to, I'm like, oh man, come on, man. He's like, man, I'm
5 of 6 or 6 of 7. Yeah,
I mean, I need to be playing quarterback.
Yeah, wasn't his passer rating was like 158 or something? Right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, perfect passer rating. Yes.
But did he ever talk about a play outside of that play? I mean, just
one play he talked about that really got me, that didn't really materialize maybe the way it was expected, was at the end of the Super Bowl game. I remember him talking about this, and it just kind of gave me chills to hear him say this. Like, he's like, yeah, when we were getting ready to line up for that last play, which of course went to Kevin Dyson, he stretched the ball out.
I just knew it was going to Frank, though. I knew it was.
Right. And that's what Frank said too. He said, I'm like, when we broke the huddle and went to line up, I was like, Steve's going to throw the ball to me, and we're going to tie. This is the last play of the Super Bowl. It's coming to me. And that really got me to hear him talk about that. And then another one that I thought was cool to hear him talk about actually turned out to be the last game of his career when the Titans played in New England in that frigid playoff game. And him talking about how they went over to a mall that was like next to the hotel, and they weren't really, they knew it's like, it's going to be cold. But then when they walk outside, they're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be freezing, man. I don't know how we're going to deal with this. But he talked about a lot of things like that. To me, the cool stuff was him talking about just the little things that happened during games that weren't necessarily big plays, like the time that the Titans were playing in the AFC Championship game in 2002 in Oakland, and LL Cool J was performing at halftime, and the Titans were coming out of the tunnel to go back out and get ready for the second half. And I guess it was the whole concert part was a little slow getting off the field, and they had this big shouting match. And I can't remember who it was. I think it was one of the linemen got into a shouting match with LL Cool J, and Frank is just like sitting there laughing at the whole thing. And like that to me is the stuff that I think is really funny. But the play at the end of the Super Bowl, that was really interesting to hear him talk about.
Did he go into detail like the route or what he covered, or he was just stunned that he didn't throw him the ball?
I mean, I think it was kind of one of those typical, the tight end just gets open however you can, in a short yardage situation there in the end zone, and then you just try to get underneath somebody and be there to make a catch. Blaine, I can't remember exactly how he described the play itself, but he seemed like he was pretty sure that it might be coming in his direction. He was like, "Oh my gosh, this is it, man. We're gonna catch this, and we're gonna, I guess at that point, tie up the Super Bowl." But that was pretty neat.
There you have it from the VOT there, Kevin Ingram.
Kevin, hey, thank you, man. We appreciate the time. I know this has been a difficult last couple of days for you, like so many, but I heard an interview with Eddie George, and he's going to come on with us next, and he said, give people their flowers. So I'll give you some flowers. You're one of the best people to do this job that we get to do, and you've done such great work in this city, and you're special to people, too, and you're special to us, and we just appreciate the time today, man.
Yeah, no doubt.
Oh, I appreciate you saying that, Mickey, and you and Blaine are great friends, and it'll remain that way. But, man, I appreciate the opportunity to come on here, and just want to express sympathies to Frank's family and friends, and to Blaine and you and all the other former Titans teammates and his family. So, I'll be thinking about you guys and Frank's family, too, but really appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, sir.
Cool. Anything you want to talk about or discuss about what you're doing now today?
Just of course, working with Vanderbilt. Basketball season's underway. We got a little break here. It's finals week for the players, so we got a few days off. We'll be back at it on Saturday. We'll be down in Fort Worth. Vanderbilt plays Texas Tech, so hoping to get back in the win column on Saturday, but just have a lot of fun doing what I'm doing.
Well, cool. And it comes across in everything you do, buddy. Thank you, and travel safe as you go down there. And, of course, we'll be listening to you do all these Vanderbilt games. Thank you, Kevin.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Y'all have a good day.
Yes, sir. One of the best to do it, and still just crushing it at Vanderbilt, Kevin Ingram. All right, when we come back, supposed to talk to Eddie George, Titans running back, teammate of Blaine's, teammate of Frank Wycheck. We're going to reach out, try to get in touch with him. And, again, also love to take your calls, your stories today as we remember our friend Frank Wycheck, 615-737-1045.
McNair, long count, takes a straight drop, looks, steps up, fires downfield, ball caught, Wycheck, 10, 5, driving for the goal line, end zone, touchdown Titans! Frank Wycheck, cast off by the Redskins, cashes it in, and Tennessee is in front by 12.
Blaine and Mickey, having a Monday show remembering our friend Frank Wycheck, and we hope you're doing the same. Remembering him as a friend, as a teammate, and as a guy who meant a lot to all of us and to this community. And we'll bring in another special guest now, a teammate of his, a teammate of Blaine Bishop. And Blaine, I'll let you take over as we say hello to the one and only Eddie George, who joins us now.
Yeah, appreciate that, EG, for coming on. Unfortunately, it's at a tough time, and I kind of want you to kind of take the floor as you always do, and do an exceptional job of being in the forefront of leadership of the group that moved here and took over this town by storm, and kind of speak on Frank Wycheck and your memories of Frank Wycheck.
Yeah, man. Well, We talked earlier, Blaine, and you just try to find the words. Um, I'm in disbelief. You're hurt, you're sad, you get excited, you laugh about the good times.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've been going through my array of emotions because I've been on the road and I'm doing my thing, and then there's moments when I stop and I think about something, or I look at pictures and I begin to cry. And it's exhausting because we've been down this road before. With Steve,
Mm-hmm.
with Josh Evans, with Rodney Thomas,
Mm-hmm.
and now Frank. All before the age of 50, and you never know when your time is going to be up, when it's going to be called. And we get so caught into our own lives and our own stuff. And I'm a big victim of it. I'm doing so much myself, and that we don't reach out to our teammates and check up on them. And you feel guilty sometimes because you're like, man, I should have called. I should have done this. But no, you should never feel guilty because our love extends beyond just a phone call. You know what I'm saying? And that's what, we have to understand is that, yes, we all have our purpose in life. Yes, we do. And, but my love for Frank, man, goes beyond the football field. He was a guy that took me under his wing when I was a rookie in Houston and encouraged me. We share a love of Philadelphia. We're both from the area. I remember Frank growing up in Philadelphia when he was going to high school there. We have a mutual friend in Kevin Plank, who's the CEO of Under Armour.
Right.
And he told me in '97 in the locker room at Baptist, in one of the illustrious locker room at Baptist.
Yeah. Nice big locker room.
Right. He says, EG, man, you got to invest with Kevin, man. I mean, he's going to do big things. I'm like, Frank, man, I'm not investing in no T-shirt company, man. I'll wear it, but I ain't invest in it. And 2 years later, 3 years later, it goes public. He says, see, EG, I told you it was going to blow up.
In that Frank Wycheck voice, right? That high pitch. See, man, I told you.
Yeah, man. He had a high pitched voice, but he would split your wig.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, man, that we have to talk about him in this regard, because I would love to have a day where me and you and Mark Robb, the Freak, and Samari and Steve and just sit around. We talk about the good old days, and because every year, every decade, you extract something different from our time together, something of value. You know what I'm saying? What it meant, and it means something different. We all had our own ambitions, we all had our own goals and desires, but we understood the true value of team. And this is where race doesn't matter. How much money you make doesn't matter. When you are grinding next to the man next to you and you are trusting in him wholeheartedly, that is your brother. You are connected, on a soul level.
Forever.
You know what I'm saying? I know I'm rambling because I don't know what to say. I'm just speaking, from the spirit.
Heart, man.
I miss Frank. I wish I could have told him I loved him. I appreciate him, man. Just gone too soon. And, we have to, at some point turn the page from the shock and the sting and the hurt of the death and begin to really appreciate and celebrate his life.
Well, with Eddie George, our leader and forefront of everything of the team that moved to Tennessee.
Eddie, there's a picture of you and Frank, and your arms are locked. It looks to be in Jacksonville. I think we probably all know what day that was taken. That's certainly a moment and a memory that's burned into a lot of our minds. Do you have a favorite play or moment between you and Frank that you could talk about? Because, again, this picture is just amazing.
Yeah, or did y'all start doing that after every game? Or what was that? Yeah, because I see that everywhere.
We did that. That was like an interlock, we used to call it. After a big play or after a big game or after a win, we would just lock arms. You know what I mean? I think I got it off of a Pete Rock and CL Smooth video I saw. And I thought it was really cool, like the celebration. I wasn't big on dancing and all that nonsense that the choreograph. I was just, about my business and just that was just something that we kind of did. We won a game or had a touchdown, and it was just, man, we were interlocked in brothers, man, and that was after we beat Jacksonville for the third time, going to the AFC Championship game. I'll never forget that moment. And that was a real special moment, man.
I know Blaine has always talked about you and y'all's friendship and your leadership. And we were talking about this earlier. You said something last night that was, I just thought, a beautiful sentiment. I actually shared it when we started the show. It was, I believe you did a hit with Channel 2 News, and you said it's important to give people their flowers while they can still get them.
Yeah.
It's important to tell people what they mean while you still can. I got to tell you, man, that it took me a minute to get myself together after hearing you say that last night.
Yeah, I mean, it's events like this, unfortunately, that make you reflect and be present in the moment now. I'm sorry, I'm in a cab in New York, so if you hear something, just
Got you. I appreciate your time.
But no, it's all good. Like I just took time out today in between me moving around and shaking, and all I'm doing is to call every teammate and tell them, check on them with the situation where we're at, because again, this particular unit has been hit by some heavy blows when it comes to death. And at some point we're going to have to get together and just be us. No cameras, no radio, and just get around the guys and just be raw. Whatever. There's no agenda to cry, have a big cry session, none of that. If it gets to that, that's fine. But we need each other to heal, because we shared something so great and so grand and so beautiful that only we can understand that, and we need each other now. I had to call Brad today. I called B-Hop and in tears. Like, I just need somebody to talk to. I needed him just to listen, because it was it's levels of frustration. He's grieving, and it's amazing because this brings up the same grieving that I had for Steve, and you're still going through it. It's just different now. You know what I'm saying? So we just need a win. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you coming on. I know we're all you started the texturing and everything else with everybody on there to make sure that we are intentional, as you said, to make sure that we get together at some point in time at different times, and to make sure the bond that we have, regardless we hadn't seen each other in years or talked to each other or seeing people all the time, that we get together, and it's something that can't be broke. That bond will always be there, because we had a special group of guys that not only because we moved here and we had success, but we had success because we played together as a unit, and that brotherhood will never be forgotten. So I just appreciate you taking out the time. I know you Eddie George, and there's a lot of things going on around, but at the same time, that's what makes you special, and that you made enough time, even in a taxi drive, to come and speak on Frank Wycheck. Man. So I really appreciate it, and man, take care of you and your family, and keep doing your thing, brother.
Yeah, man. Love you, bro. All
right, man. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you, Eddie. Eddie George, Titans running back, now TSU head coach, out there doing his business today and taking time on a busy and difficult day to check in with us. We appreciate it, and getting several messages from people who are just very much appreciating hearing from him today, and hearing from Kevin Ingram as well. And we want to hear from you in hour number 2 of the show. Teresa Walker is coming up. In about 20 minutes or so, we'll have Teresa. We'll get her memories of Frank. She wrote just a beautiful story about him, but phone lines are open. 615.
I want to hear from you.
Absolutely. Your stories, your interactions with Frank, we'd love to hear them. 615-737-1045. It's Blaine and Mickey. Blaine and Mickey, 1045 The Zone. Just appreciate so much all of your time and participation in what has been a tough show today. We know a lot of you are hurting, and a lot of you are sad, and you went through a tough weekend with the storms, and then you lost a friend in Frank Wycheck, and we lost a friend as well. And we've just been trying to keep the phones open and trying to keep the lines of communication open today to let people just say what's on their mind and tell stories. And wanted to make sure that we brought in Teresa Walker today, our friend in the Associated Press, Hall of Fame writer who has covered this team since they've been here. And Teresa, one of the first things I saw on Twitter, and we appreciate your time today very much, you tweeted out the link to your story with the Associated Press, and I would advise everyone to consume it, to find it and read it. You said, the story I never wanted to write. I can't imagine how hard this was for you to write a story about somebody that you knew as well as you knew Frank.
Well, that's the thing, is journalists, and for folks who hear this, it might freak you out a little bit, but, for high-profile people, we do obit preparation. We've got a whole file for them, with X's, and for age, their birthday, so that we can double-check things like that, because it's news when somebody of note passes. I mean, I helped with the obituary for the late Pat Summitt. There's prep on lots of people. There's people, we did actually our first prep on Pat Summitt after the late Payne Stewart's horrible plane accident, because it's like, wait a minute, these people are in planes an awful lot. So you do that kind of thing. And ironically, I had actually told somebody last week that I knew I needed to do this because unfortunately those of us who've been around, we knew what Frank had been going through in recent years, and I knew I needed to do that. I couldn't bring myself to do that. And when I saw the release yesterday from the company, Teresa, she used to work for the Titans, and with the family's confirmation, it met all the AP requirements. The team had story from Jim Wyatt, and there was the social media. So it's like I shifted into mode, but then it's like I sat for a second, and it's like, guys, that's one of the toughest stories I've ever written. And I mean, we've been through this before. Steve McNair, Rob Baronis. That was a stunner. And this one, even knowing it was coming, because Frank was such a sweet guy, and such a hardworking guy, always available, such a sweet guy, that it was just a kick to the teeth.
The thing that has struck me the most, I've been on the air today. I was on the air on this station the day after Steve McNair died. And I was struck then, and I've been struck again with how many people have a personal story about Steve or Frank or Blaine or Eddie or Dyson. They were so involved in the community and still are today. Blaine would never toot his own horn, but seems like 5 times a month he leaves here and we talk about what we're going to go do. And he goes, well, I'm on a board for a charity, or I'm volunteering for this charity, or I'm going to go help with this. They all still do the same stuff. Blaine is much or more than anybody. But people really, they're so connected to that first group of Titans. I mean, they truly, in a lot of cases, had personal interaction and literally knew these guys in a lot of personal ways. That's what makes this hurt so bad.
Well, exactly. I mean, if you didn't come out to a training camp practice and get an autograph, or go to a charity event, or shoot when he was doing working for this station on the morning show, or listening to him call games when he was the color commentator with Mike Keith. I mean, there were so many ways to connect. And that first 5 years of the Titans, I think people who've moved here in the last few decade or so don't get how, guys, it's literally like the switch was flipped, okay? Blaine knows this so well. I mean, nobody cared about this team when they played in 97 in Memphis or at Vandy in 98, but then the new nickname, the new uniforms, the new stadium, and then going 13-3, and then Frank and that Music City Miracle, guys. I mean, my colleague, I was not writing the main bar that day. My colleague Barry Wilner was, who's now retired from AP, and he had covered the Buffalo win over Houston in the playoffs, the big Houston Oilers collapse. He turned to me right before the kickoff by the Bills, and he said, don't worry, your team's not out of it. I always get the weird ones. And I was standing getting ready to go down to the locker room, and to watch that, and Frank, perfect passer rating. I mean, the guy who led this team in receptions for 3 straight seasons had a perfect passer rating. And I was almost on a line in the press box with that. And to see that ball, I knew it was a lateral. I just was afraid that maybe there might not be a video, a TV angle, because Jeff Fisher, this team so many times has gotten the fourth, fifth, sixth crew, and there's not as many cameras at those games as there are a primetime game like tonight. And it depends on what angle they get as to whether or not they uphold or overturn something. And I'm like, that was a lateral. Will it stand? And some of the long, I don't know if I breathed. I don't know if anyone in that stadium breathed until the official came out from under the hood and gave us that announcement that the touchdown stood. And it was just such a moment. And, Frank executed in that moment like he did in everything that he ever tried to do.
Yeah, sure did. Teresa Walker joining us to share memories and thoughts of Frank Wycheck.
Well, T, man, I guess the history of Frank Wycheck as a player, but then as a broadcaster, I just wanted to get your thoughts on what do you think he's more remembered for outside of the Music City Miracle, as a broadcaster, or more so because the Hey Buddy and all that, or as a player?
It's a great question, Blaine, because, there's those of us of a generation that are going to remember him for the Music City Miracle and for as a player, and, being that guy who always found a way to be open for Steve and was always making plays in the blue and white. And then there's going to be that generation that, well, more like my son, who was, my son was a baby. He's now almost 25, but he was a baby. He's seen Music City Miracle. He's watched some of those games, strangely enough, on YouTube to catch up on some of the plays from those days. But, his generation knows him more as a broadcaster for calling those Titan games and things like that. So, and he did it for such a long period after his retirement. So, you're going to have that good mix. But if you haven't seen it, I'll just remind you, go on, and my story has the link to the play. Go just YouTube it. Music City Miracle. There's a reason when the NFL celebrated its 100th anniversary in 2019, guys, that they also, the Music City Miracle was the fourth greatest play of the first 100 years. It was so unexpected. It launched that run to Atlanta and the Super Bowl. I mean, it was stunning, a stunning comeback because, people were, photographers were in position on the Buffalo sideline to take pictures of the celebration by the Bills. The Bills got out of their gaps. And, to this day, Buffalo fans still insist that was a forward pass. And as Frank once described it, it was the illusion of it. I fell backward the way I jumped up and threw it, and then the way Dyson kind of stretched that leg and then stretched back to make the catch. If you look at it, Titan fans absolutely know it was a lateral. Bills fans will insist to the dang breath that it was a forward pass, but it is still one of the greatest plays in NFL history. So I'm going to remember him as Frank Wycheck, the guy that every time I needed to talk to him, he would respond. And even after even when he was dealing with CTE, I talked to him when Wes Welker was trying to come back from a concussion, and he talked about the challenges of that. And he was open with his issues. That's why in the statement yesterday, his family made clear they're going to honor his wishes, to help contribute towards CTE and brain research for traumatic brain injuries. And I won't be surprised. I don't think any of us will be surprised if there is CTE damage there. He was pretty sure that's what he was suffering from. And he always made time to talk after the worst loss, the best win, and at some of the toughest times of his life. He always made time to talk because he wanted to, share what he saw as a person. And you guys have been in this long enough. Sometimes there's folks that, you have plenty of great reasons you do not want to talk. And, as human beings, we understand that. And Frank always made time to talk. And I hope I always made that clear to him, how much I always appreciated him for being that kind of a human being.